Hi guys, Ian Johnson from driversuccess.com. Today we're going to talk about dealing with difficult business-to-business customers. And in essence, what we're doing here today is we're basically pushing reset with this customer. Okay, I'm going to show you 3 essential steps or 3 essential criteria to just turning this account around. And in this case, we're talking about those situations where you've got this customer that no matter what you do, no matter how well you service them, no matter what price you give them, no matter what service upgrade you provide to them, no matter what you do, they're just not going to be satisfied. And it's no longer a question of, the customer just being difficult. It's becoming a question of whether or not it makes sense to continue to sell to this customer. Okay, you've actually reached a point where it's a question of gross profit and service costs. It's just, this customer is quickly becoming a service strain. So we're going to cover 3 essential steps to turning this customer around and to basically explaining a new reality to them. Okay, so we're going to start off first, right off the bat, with talking about managing customer expectations. Okay, now, one of the things about dealing with difficult customers is that somewhere along the way, it's more than likely that that customer's expectations weren't properly dealt with or discussed. Okay, so managing customer expectations is critical. Okay, and it's something that has to be done at the outset of any new relationship. I covered this in a previous video. It is something that has to be done at the outset of any new relationship, but it is also something that is continually done with your customer. So you've got to manage your customer's expectations because your customer is always coming into this relationship with preconceived notions as to what a service or proper service levels should be based on how they were serviced by your competition. So if you don't sit down to talk about what your customer's expectations are and to find a fit between what your company can do and what your customer expects you to do, if you don't do that, then your customer is going to dictate all future terms of business, and they're going to make you jump through hoops in order to keep that business. It's going to force you to go outside of your comfort zone, and it's going to force you to go above and beyond what your standard service competencies are, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So you've got to manage customer expectations. Everything comes after the salesperson's ability to sit down with the customer and discuss what they expect, okay, and what your company can provide. It is the most important aspect of sales success. Everything comes after. Okay? So you got to manage your customers' expectations. And you do that by the second step, which is defining service competencies. Now, I just basically want to do a bit of a comparison in terms of some of the mistakes that a lot of the companies make that I work with. Okay? When you think of a business-to-business market, you can't apply a business-to-consumer mindset, okay? So, business to business does not equal business to consumer. And the reason why I bring that up is because when you think about a business-to-consumer market, most of the competitors are in close proximity to one another. The market itself basically dictates the service norms within the market, okay? So, if you go to like Home Depot or Lowe's or these type of stores, a lot of them are basically across the street from one another. It's not uncommon for these companies to be right around the corner from each other. And they've got a lot of satellite locations where they're in constant competition. And if you go to a restaurant, you expect a certain level of service. You expect to be greeted. If you go to Walmart, you expect a certain level of service. Lowe's or Home Depot, you expect to be serviced in the aisles. So in a business-to-consumer market, the service norms are defined by the market. In a business-to-business market, it's completely different. In a business-to-business market, your service competencies may not be the same as your competitor because that competitor could be a world away, could be on the other side of the ocean, okay? So you've got to define what your service competencies are because they are never the same from one company to the next in a business-to-business market. You've got to say, look, Mr. Customer, we can do this, this, and this. We can do this, this, and this. And it's natural. I mean, think about it. If your competitor's overseas and your customer is overseas and they're buying from your competitor, maybe your competitor can give them a delivered price, but you can't do that if you're in North America. So you've got to define what your service competencies are in order to manage your customers' expectations. And if you don't define what your service competencies are, you're going to get in the situation where the customer says, I expect it this way, and the salesperson says, well, what customer expects that kind of service? Well, you can't know what they expect until you sit down and manage your customer expectations, talk about what they expect, And do that by defining your service competencies. So when it comes to managing a difficult customer, a lot of times it comes back to how that customer's expectations are managed and how you've defined your service competencies as a company. And if you haven't done these things and you haven't set, the criteria by which you're going to be managed or measured by your customer, and you haven't kind of, drawn a line in the sand with this customer, okay? So those are two essential steps to basically managing the customer, because what they lead you to is this third step, which is pushing reset. Okay? Now, what I mean by this is when you push reset, you're explaining a new reality to your customer. Okay? If you've gotten to the point where you can no longer afford to service this customer the way they expect to be serviced, regardless of whether you manage their expectations or regardless of how good a job you did in defining your service competencies, if you've gotten to the point now where you're saying, you know what, we're not making money on this customer, it's a service drain, it's draining too much resources. When you get to that point, you sit down with your customer and you explain a new reality. And when you do this third step, be sure that you're willing to walk away from the business, okay? When you're dealing with a difficult customer, you're going to try and manage their customer expectations. You're going to try and manage their expectations. You're going to go back and try and say, what can we do to find a solution? And then you're going to, in the process, define what your company can and cannot do. Even after the customer started buying from you and they're still upset, you can still manage their expectations. You can still redefine your service competencies as a company. You're basically redrawing your line in the sand, as we talked about earlier. But when you've done these two things and your customer is still difficult and still giving you a hard time, then that's when you've got to basically decide whether you sit down with them and explain this new reality. And the new reality is we're going to do this from now on, Mr. Customer, and this is what we can afford to do. And if it's not good enough, we're sorry. It's been great servicing you, but we're obviously not a good fit for you. So managing your customer in terms of the relationship and dealing with difficult customers, at some point in time you're going to have to ask yourself, is this customer relationship worth pursuing? Are we making money? If we're making money and it's good and they're not too much of a service drain, then go back to managing their expectations properly. Sit down with them and talk to them and say, what can we do to make this relationship stronger? Define your service competencies. Don't apply business to consumer to a business to business market. But if these two things fail and your customer's still giving you a hard time becoming a service drain, sit down with them and explain the new reality. So that's it, dealing with difficult business to business customers. Ian Johnson, driversuccess.com. Bye-bye.